Welcome to This Feels Familiar. I'm your host, Minaa B. I'm a therapist, author, and creator of the Siblinghood Theory, and this show explores the themes of belonging, conflict, and the relational patterns shaping your life. Let's dive in. Lately, everyone is talking about the concept of longevity. And one of the things I'm noticing is that people are obsessed with optimizing everything from making sure you're tracking your macros, hitting your protein goals, exercising, getting in 10K steps, getting 8 hours of sleep. But there's one particular factor that is actually one of the biggest predictors of longevity and health that is not being talked about, and that is healthy relationships. It is not your diet. It is not your fitness routine. It is not even your sleep. Are those things important? Yes. However, research shows that one of the biggest predictors of longevity and health is your relationships. Not just your relationships, but the quality of your relationships, whether they're supportive, stable, and safe, whether they are healthy, reciprocal, all of those things matter. They have people who are in healthy relationships show a lower rate of depression and anxiety. They recover from illness faster and they have a better quality of life. So today we're talking about what unhealthy relationships actually look like, because there are a lot of us who are in relationships, but I also think it's important to examine whether those relationships are actually healthy and whether they are playing a role in helping to manage our mental health and mitigate stress, or do these relationships actually add more stress to the body? So before we dive in, please take a moment to subscribe to the show. Now, before I talk to you about the signs of an unhealthy relationship, I do want to say that most people don't recognize unhealthy relationships because they've never seen a healthy one. So if you grew up with conflict that was explosive, for example, or you grew up in a family where people completely shut down and gave you the silent treatment, where your emotions got dismissed or criticized, or where someone held power over you, instead of sharing it, that becomes what feels normal to you and that becomes natural. So when you enter a romantic relationship or a friendship that has some of those same dynamics, you may not see it as a problem because you see it as familiar. And familiar feels like home, even when home was painful. And that is why people stay in unhealthy relationships. And that's why they entertain people that don't necessarily bring much value into their life. I've spoken about this before in previous episodes where I don't necessarily like to use the language of who we attract into our lives, because I believe we attract all kinds of people. However, the people that get to stay in our lives, that is what we need to pay attention to. Those are the people that you are making a choice to entertain, because there are probably plenty of people that tried to come into your life. Think about somebody who liked you romantically, or that friend that probably had some annoying habits, and you found a way to make sure those people had no access to you. So you do have to think about the people who do have access to you, and why is that? Especially if those people have really, really poor qualities that don't necessarily bring the best out of you, and you know that the qualities that they have are not healthy. So I want to paint a clearer picture by helping you understand what are some signs that you might be in an unhealthy relationship. So I'm going to start with the most serious sign, and that is abuse. And when I say abuse, I'm not just talking about physical violence, because I do find that in our society, people only view abuse as some sort of physical altercation. It's important to understand that abuse takes many forms. It can be emotional. So, for example, being in a relationship with someone who constantly criticizes you, engages in name calling, or just tries to tear you down. It can also be verbal abuse, and that might look like yelling at someone, making threats, trying to humiliate them. It can also be financial, and this is really important to pay attention to in romantic relationships. Controlling someone's money, preventing someone from working, getting them fired from a job on purpose, controlling their finances, putting locks on credit cards or different things like that. And it can also be sexual. And it can be isolation as well, cutting someone off from friends and family. So abuse is about power and control. It's about using tactics to make someone smaller, weaker, and more dependent on you. So understand that abuse is deliberate and it is also patterned. It's not about one particular incident that took place. It's literally about how that person relates to others. The only way they know how to relate is by engaging in some sort of tactic to control or manipulate. So if you're in a relationship where someone is abusing you in any form, that relationship is unhealthy. It is not a relationship where you should be thinking to yourself, this needs more work or we need to go to therapy. Unhealthy in a way that requires you to leave is what I'm referring to here. Because sometimes we're dealing with behaviors that we think we can fix if we just see a therapist, a couples counselor, if I read more self help books or listen to more podcasts. There are some people who are content with being abusive. There are some people who do not want to treat people kindly. There are some people who are intentional about causing harm. Those are not people you need to be going to therapy with, nor is that someone that you need to be spending most of your time in therapy talking about. It's really important to understand when abuse is happening, but it's also important to understand that not everybody is trying to be kind to you. Because I think there are times where we try to say, well, this person probably is hurting and that's why they're being abusive. I need you to understand that there are times where people are not hurting at all and they like being abusive. There's something about the power and the control that they have that they enjoy. So, as I said, abuse is the first sign, and abuse can happen in a friendship. It can also happen in a partnership. It can even happen at work. So, as I go through this episode, I also want you to be thinking about your work environment because if you are in an abusive work environment, that is also impacting the longevity of your health. So, as I said, the first sign to pay attention to is abuse. Now, here is the second sign it is poor emotional attunement. This is the foundation of healthy relationships, and it's where things start to break down. Emotional attunement means your partner, friend, or family member can see you. They recognize your emotional state, they can respond to your needs, and they have empathy for what you're going through, how you feel. They tend to your needs, they ask questions about how you feel. They really care about your emotional well being. Poor emotional attunement, however, looks like you, for example, telling someone you're hurt about something that they did and they dismiss you. It can look like you expressing a need and that person minimizing the need and downplaying the need versus being honest about the fact that they may not be able to meet that need. It can look like you struggling, and when you go to tell a friend or your partner, they make everything about themselves. They can never hold space for you. That is what poor emotional attunement looks like. It's the relationship where you feel like you're not really being seen, like they're not really interested in understanding you, and like your inner world doesn't matter to them. And I find that this is something that people normalize a lot, where we might say that person just isn't good with emotions or this is just how they are. Well, if this is how they are, I really encourage you to ask yourself if this is how they are and they refuse to change. Is that something you want to continue to deal with? So these are questions that you have to ask yourself. If this is how they are, is it causing me significant pain in my life? Is this something that I can actually deal with? Or is this a sign that since they don't have any intention of changing, then maybe I might need to exit this relationship or I do need to make adjustments to how I show up in it? Now, the third sign that that you should pay attention to when it comes to recognizing if you are in an unhealthy relationship is poor conflict navigation. I need to say this first part. Every healthy relationship does have conflict. We are relational beings. We are not always going to get along. We're not going to always see things eye to eye. Conflict is simply inevitable in every relationship that you are in. However, the difference is in how people move through the conflict. Unhealthy conflict navigation looks like the conflict just simply never gets resolved. So we sweep things under the rug and pretend it didn't happen. You might find that you're having the same argument over and over and over again. And maybe in that argument, you're being dismissed or minimized. One person shuts down and the other person pursues. So there's kind of this push and pull dynamic. And it almost feels as if nothing is ever getting addressed because there's always that one person who refuses to tackle the issue. And you find yourself begging them to acknowledge what happened or talk about what happened, or you're asking them over and over again, what did I do? Clearly, I've made you upset. Can you please talk to me? Can you please tell me what I did? So, this looks like stonewalling, where someone is explicitly ignoring you and giving you the silent treatment. Sometimes conflict can also be explosive. And so, going back to some of the things I shared earlier around abuse, there are going to be times where people can be abusive when conflict happens, but there are also times where people may not necessarily be intentionally abusive, but their behaviors can be harmful. They might scream at you, they might call you names, and you might start to feel some fear being around this person. And this is another one that we have to pay attention to. One person dominates and the other person gives up trying to be heard. So you might have a relationship where that person really likes to lean into their power and wants to have power over you in the relationship. And so it gives you no space to be you in the relationship or show up or express what's happening. And so it's relationships where conflict kind of feels dangerous, where you don't know if a disagreement will turn into a screaming match, maybe because in the past it has, or maybe it's what you witnessed growing up. It can also be one where you've learned to just agree to avoid the chaos. Or sometimes, think about this, do you apologize for things knowing you didn't do anything wrong, but you apologize because you hope that they would start talking to you again or they won't be mad or they will just finally be more open. So, those are some things I encourage you to pay attention to and understand that healthy conflict means you can disagree, you can express your needs, you can hear the other person, and you can move toward resolution. It might be uncomfortable, but it doesn't leave you feeling wounded or unsafe. The next sign to pay attention to is control and power imbalances. In healthy relationships, power is relatively equal. So you both get a voice and you both have a say in whatever is happening because you recognize that both of your needs matter and you're willing to compromise and be flexible to meet each other's needs. But in unhealthy relationships, one person is always holding the power. They are the ones making the decisions. They decide what's okay, what's not okay. They decide if you are right or wrong, or if you're allowed to even have choices or make certain decisions. Sometimes they'll even make it seem as if your feelings are not valid because they want to hold all the power. So this can look like someone constantly criticizing the other, one person making all the decisions, one person monitoring the other's phones or social media. This can also look like trying to isolate you from friends and family, or even threatening to leave you if they don't get their way. And this is something that I see get normalized often. And I do want you to understand that control isn't love. Dominance is not care. It's really important to understand that power imbalances create environments where one person is always smaller, always trying to appease, and always walking on eggshells. So, this is a relationship that can be really hard to function in because it's simply unhealthy. So, pay attention to control and power imbalances in your relationships. The next sign is lack of reciprocity. This is so important. In healthy relationships, there's give and take. You show up for them, they show up for you. You invest in a relationship, they invest back. You listen, they listen. You make sacrifices, they make sacrifices. That is what relationships is all about. Lack of reciprocity is when the relationship is one sided. So you're always the one initiating, you're always the one adapting, you're always the one putting in the effort while they do the bare minimum. Or you're always supporting them while your needs go unmet. It's friendships where you're the emotional support system, but they're never there for you. It's romantic relationships where you're constantly apologizing or compromising while they remain unchanged. So you need to pay attention to reciprocity because this is how resentment builds. You start to feel used and you start to feel unseen because your needs don't matter enough to the other person to meet them. And this is how relationships die over time because the reality is when we say we are relational beings, that also means that within the act of being in relationship, there should be reciprocal care.
The World Cup is back and Football Weekly is going daily. From the goals and the glory to the politics and the problems, join me, Max Rushton, and our expert panel every day of the tournament. World Cup Daily, listen on Spotify now and watch the full episodes on YouTube.
The next sign is a lack of emotional safety. This is the umbrella that ties everything together. So emotional safety means you can be yourself without fear. You can express your feelings, your thoughts, your vulnerabilities without being punished or criticized or even mocked. A lack of emotional safety in a relationship can show up as you probably feeling like you can't be your authentic self because maybe you're going to be judged, ridiculed, or criticized. You're always monitoring what you say. We might look at this as a form of hypervigilance, maybe because you have relational trauma with whoever the person is. And so you feel like you can't show up a certain way or say certain things. You feel like you can't express disagreement. You can't ask for the things that you want because you're afraid of how people are going to react to you. It's also the relationship where you feel like you're walking on eggshells. And it's really important to understand that emotional safety isn't just about overt aggression. It's about the subtle ways people make you feel unsafe. So the criticism that's dressed up as, I'm just being honest with you. I'm your friend. I should tell you the truth. Well, yes, friends should tell each other the truth, but in a compassionate way. We don't need brutal honesty in order to make a point. You can say, I don't like your dress in a very, very kind way, such as, you know what, this dress may not be as flattering compared to the other dress that you tried on, but if you choose to wear it, hey, that's up to you. Versus you look crazy right now, you look awful, you look horrible. And this is just one small example. I want you to think about ways that people in your life have made you feel unsafe emotionally on a bigger scale. Because right now, my example is simply just about a dress. But think about little things in life that matter to you and the way that people show up around them. Do they actually tend to what's happening and offer you support, compassion, and care, or are they dismissive? Because being around very, very dismissive people can feel very emotionally unsafe. And the reason why all of this matters is because if you're in a relationship that has even a few of these signs, it can affect your health negatively. It can put your nervous system in a constant state of stress. Now your cortisol is elevated, your immune system is compromised, and now you're aging faster. And beyond the physical, you're being shaped. Your sense of self is being warped. You're learning that your needs don't matter, that you're not worthy of respect, that you have to earn love and safety instead of them being given to you. This is why relationships are such a longevity hack, but only if they're healthy, because unhealthy relationships are actively harming your body. So, what does healthy actually look like? What are you aiming for when you say you want a healthy relationship? So, I'm just going to give you my perspective as a therapist of what I believe healthy relationships look like and what research says that really plays a role in the longevity of our lives when it comes to quality relationships. Healthy relationships have emotional attunement. People see each other and respond with empathy. They can have conflict in a way that leads to resolution, and power is relatively balanced. The needs of both people matter, and there is reciprocity and emotional safety. In healthy relationships, you feel seen, you feel heard, you feel like your needs matter, you feel safe being vulnerable, you feel safe in being just yourself, you feel respected, you can disagree without it being a threat. You also know that you can grow and you can be yourself because that person isn't going to try to stifle you. And this is important in friendships, but also in romantic relationships. Your nervous system feels settled. Your health improves. Your sense of self strengthens. You start to believe you deserve good things because good things are happening to you because people treat you well. So it's really important to just have a clear understanding of what healthy actually is. And if you're listening to this and recognizing patterns in the relationships you're in, I also want to be clear here and let you know that this isn't your fault completely if you find that you have a pattern of being in unhealthy relationships because you didn't create these dynamics alone. And you don't have to stay in these relationships as well. But leaving is scary. I get it, especially if the unhealthy relationship is the only kind you've ever known. And if it is a family member or a really, really close friend that you're not ready to break up with. So I just want to pause here for a second to tell you to show yourself compassion. And before I get into giving you tools on how to build healthy relationships, I want you to remember that there are resources out there for you to learn how to care for yourself and learn how to manage the relationships that you are in that you probably want to break free from, or the relationships where you realize maybe this person is not the healthiest. I don't want to, remove them from my life. So now I have to figure out how to be in relationship with them. Because the key thing to understand here is that relationships are one of the biggest factors in your health and longevity, but only healthy ones. If you're in a relationship with abuse, poor attunement, unresolved conflict, power imbalances, or a lack of reciprocity, those relationships can be actively harming you. So, recognizing these signs is the first step. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. And once you can't unsee it, you do have choices on how you can navigate them. So, here's something that I want you to remember. We are relational beings. We need relationships to thrive, and we also need relationships to heal. But there's a cultural narrative that healing means disconnecting, and that if you've been hurt in relationships, you need to take time alone. You need to practice solitude, figure yourself out, become whole on your own first, and get into that relationship. Now, is solitude important and helpful? Yes, it is. Time to yourself is important. But here's what that narrative misses. You can't teach your nervous system how to regulate in relationship if you're actually not in relationship. Your nervous system learned dysregulation through relationships, through people who weren't attuned to you, through conflict that wasn't resolved, through betrayal and abandonment. And it can only relearn regulation through relationships too, through people who are attuned, through conflict that gets resolved, through consistency, reciprocity, and safety. You need secure relationships to rewire your nervous system. So that means you need to be exposed to people. And I know it feels counterintuitive because you're probably thinking if people hurt me, then I probably need to go inward to heal. Inward healing is beautiful. Yes, go to therapy, talk to your therapist, listen to the podcast like this, read your books. But again, in order to exist in relationship, we do have to heal our relational trauma. And the only way to do that is to be exposed to people. That is how you learn that relationships can be safe. That's how your body learns to trust. So, as you're recognizing unhealthy patterns and stepping away from them, you also need to be building healthy relationships, not instead of healing work, but alongside it. So, here are some things that I want you to start paying attention to so that you can have healthy relationships in your life. The first thing is make relationships with people who have emotional attunement. Start noticing who actually sees you. Who are the people who ask follow-up questions about things you've mentioned before? Also, in the context of dating, really quickly, make sure you date people who actually are curious to know things about you. Because a healthy sign of emotional attunement is when you meet somebody who actually wants to know you as a person. So if you find that when you meet somebody, you are the one asking all the questions, you're the one leading the conversation, there is no emotional investment because that person is just answering, "How are you today? I'm good. What's your favorite thing to do? I like playing basketball and I like doing this, and that's it. Period." Right? If the person is not following up to ask you questions about yourself, that shows that this person struggles with emotional attunement. That's simple. So I also want you to recognize that in the interactions that you have with people, because sometimes we will let those interactions linger. And then we realize I'm really frustrated because I'm in a relationship with somebody who doesn't ask me anything about myself. But if that's how they were when you met them, that's a sign that this is somebody who has very low emotional attunement. So pay attention to that and try to seek people who demonstrate care, empathy, interest, curiosity, and understanding. Also, pay attention to the people who show up consistently because healthy relationships are built on reliability. Start paying attention to who follows through with their word, who says they'll be there and actually is, who the people who respond to your text, even if it takes them 24 hours or 48 hours and they hit you up and they say, "I'm so sorry," blah, 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 whatever the reason is. Just pay attention to the people who are consistent with their care and with the attention that they give you. Because here's the thing, consistency might feel boring if you're used to drama and intensity, but it's actually what your nervous system needs to feel safe. I encourage you to also start practicing vulnerability. You don't have to share everything immediately with someone, and I encourage you not to, right? Keep some things a little clandestine about yourself and let that build up over time. So, the first time you meet a friend or the first time you go on a date, it doesn't mean that you have to tell that person every single thing about your life or every hard thing that ever happened to you that first day. But I also want you to think of ways that you can show up authentically and practice sharing real things about yourself. See how they respond. If they respond with care, you can share more next time. The goal here is to test safety. Does this person have emotional attunement? Is this person going to have space for what it is that I'm sharing? Can they sit with this without judgment or criticism? Those are the things you're looking for. This one is another big one that I want to share with you, which is resolving conflict when it happens. Healthy relationships will have conflict, like I said earlier, but the difference is that they learn how to resolve it. The people in those relationships resolve the conflict. When something comes up between you and someone you're building a relationship with, you have to address it. Don't avoid it. Try not to explode about it. Just talk about it. And if that person does respond with defensiveness or being dismissive or the silent treatment, that's them showing you more about their nervous system, their emotional attunement, their regulation versus you, right? And then again, you have to ask yourself, well, if this is how they respond to conflict, how do I want to show up in this relationship with them? Lastly, make sure you surround yourself with people who reciprocate. Notice who gives and who takes. Notice who asks about you. Notice who makes effort in seeing you, learning about you, being there for you. Start prioritizing relationships where it's balanced, where you're both showing up for each other. This is how you teach yourself that you're worthy of reciprocity and that your needs matter enough for people to meet them. So if this episode resonated with you, please rate and subscribe to the show. You can also subscribe to my newsletter, All the Hard Things, on Substack, and you can grab a copy of my book, Owning Our Struggles, wherever books are sold. Here's what I want you to remember today. Healthy relationships are the longevity hack you need in your life. If you're in an unhealthy relationship, whether it be with a partner, friend, family member, a sibling, parent, colleague, recognize it. See it clearly for what it is and understand that you deserve to be in relationships where you're seen, safe, and your needs matter. Until next time.